Hello, my wonderful, beautiful friends, guys. Welcome back to our /PettyRevenge, where people get little wins on others, and the stories are not only hilarious, but also satisfying. And in this episode, OP tells a tale about a Karen boss who's out to get her because she's jealous of OP's husband. Ain't that something? Guys, I hope you enjoy the stories. Don't shake your heads too hard, and as always, you can send or link your post to this email right here. Let's dive in. At my middle school, we had a vice principal who fancied herself a dictator. Any tiny bit of power she got was an issue. But I was a tiny middle schooler at the time and a good kid, not often in trouble, so I didn't cross her path until 8th grade. Her best friend was a bus driver named Pat. For 6th and 7th grade years, we had an awesome bus driver. He was nice to the kids, and he let us put the windows down when the heat got too much. But he retired, and the bus driver we got was an extremely angry middle-aged woman named Pat, who did not like children. In fact, she hated us, and she made that clear every day. She would often yell, "The windows stay up, or we go back to the school," as she had the only fan blowing in her face on a 100-degree school bus. Now in hindsight, this was to keep us from throwing things out of the bus, but that was never an issue before or after. The real reason was that before the bus driver could leave the bus at the end of the day, all the windows had to be back up and locked, so this saved her effort. My bus stop was the first she drove by, but the last to pick up, and had been that way for years. Well, Pat changed this, and she decided she only wanted to stop on the first pass by, and kept threatening to leave the kids in my neighborhood if we made her stop twice. I first got on the Karen VP's radar because Pat left me on the side of a very busy road one morning. She could have stopped, but she wagged her finger at me as she drove away and left me. I flipped off the kids laughing at me out of the back window, and the bus driver Pat thought I was flipping her off. She tried to get me suspended, but I didn't get suspended because she left me with no way to get to school, on the side of an extremely busy road, and my mom threatened to sue if it happened again. But after that, they had it out for me. Pat tried several times to get me suspended on anything. She even coached a kid to say that I bullied him and made him cry. But when the real principal brought in the kid, he said, "No, OP's my friend, it was those other kids." Anything to get me in trouble. So the petty revenge comes here. I was doing my best to make the bus driver's life hell in little passive-aggressive ways. She got annoyed at anything, so it was easy, but Karen was harder to do anything to. So after fighting with the bus driver and assistant principal for most of the year, revenge came in the form of a police fundraiser. They were advertising it on the local TV news and the local radio stations. So the way it worked is if you put someone up for arrest, the cops would show up and throw someone in handcuffs, and then, quote, put them in jail, until they could call a few people and fundraise the bail. Of course, the person had to agree to be taken to jail. It was mostly for fun, and since it was for charity, many people went to jail laughing and playing along. The person who set up the arrest had to pay $10, but it was worth it. My mom, after being annoyed by Pat and Karen all year, put Karen, the assistant principal, up for arrest. The cops show up and they took her to the room, where she could call her friends and raise the money for her to go free. The idea was that mom was going to keep having her arrested as long as she could. Except when Karen was in jail, nobody would give her the bail money, not even for a charity. So she ended up missing most of the day, sitting in a police precinct trying to get anyone to put up enough money for her to leave. Eventually, the cops told my mom that they had to let her go because it had gone on too long, and Karen raised $0 for charity. And she was the only one who did not raise the bail money that day, letting her know exactly how much she meant to everyone at the school. I had a friend who heard her complaining about it later that day. She called the principal, who did donate some, but the other teachers gave nothing, and none of her friends would help out. She apparently thought one of the teachers put her up for it. It's so minor and so petty, it almost doesn't count. But when I left school at the end of the year, Mom went up to her and asked, "How was jail?" before we walked away for the last time. And that was the first time I ever heard a screeching sound from a human. Guys, this revenge is absolute gold. And to be completely honest, I thought the petty revenge was going to be OP's mom telling everyone that they shouldn't donate to keep the Karen principal in jail. But holy, like the fact that OP's mom did not have to say a thing and that nobody donated, oh my goodness, looks like the truth came out that day. So my daughter, who's 17 years old, asked me to post this here. I'm the dad who does as the women in my life tell me, which is how I ended up in a restaurant tonight with snobs. So here's the characters. It was my wife's coworker and her husband, arrogant engineer number 1, wife's coworker number 2 and her husband, my CPA, and lastly, arrogant engineer number 2 and his wife. Each couple has 2 teenage children with us. We are at a Japanese steakhouse in America, where the chefs cook in front of you. Coworker 1 and arrogant engineer number 1 invited all of us for their youngest daughter's birthday. So the parents are all at one table and the teens at another. At the teen table, my daughters order sushi appetizers, mocktails, and shrimp with scallops. At our table, the sake's flowing, along with a few top-shelf drinks. My wife and I order appetizers, drinks, and dinners. We're all paying for ourselves, and I see that engineer 1 and 2 seem to be in competition for who can spend the most. My CPA and I chuckle at them and stay out of the fray, until engineer number 2 hears my daughter order. And then he says to her, "Careful now, your daddy's only an agricultural engineer. You don't want to break the bank with that order. He doesn't make as much as us real engineers." Now for context, they are structural engineers with bachelor's degrees, and I'm an agricultural engineer with a PhD. I work for governments, private investors, and several agro corporations. I also own my own consulting firm, and I help build sustainable reusable gardens. And this work allows me to travel to poorer countries and help them use what they have to start growing their own food. Apparently these men thought that all I did was travel to these impoverished places and teach people how to dig in the dirt. They believed I did all this work for free, and therefore I made very little money. Now I'm not rich by any stretch, but I'm comfortable. We don't do extravagance, so we have savings and my wife works. However, in 2023, I was awarded a handsome contract to design tower gardens in several states. It's a 7-figure contract over 3 years. So back to dinner. These snobby guys were asking me the most ridiculous things, like is it good to grow onions and carrots in the same garden? They were laughing at me and my work until their wives told them to stop. I chalked it up to drunken arrogance, and I don't even bother to answer. My CPA was laughing so hard that he almost fell out of his chair. Apparently he's engineer number 1's CPA as well, and he knows the ins and outs of both of our finances. So engineer number 1 taunts the CPA to tell the table what he brought home last year, after bonuses. CPA was reluctant to do so, but engineer number 1 kept pushing him to share. So he pulls up the figures on his phone and he tells us it's about a third of what I brought home in 2023. My CPA then says to me, "I have yours up too. You want me to share?" Giving me a wink. I decline and he nods. Cue another round of taunts, saying that I'm broke, people in my field make no money, yada yada yada. A little while later, I go to the restroom and then find the waiter. I pay for the whole check and leave a generous tip on top of what they added for a big party. When the night was over, the waiter wishes everyone a good night. Engineer number 1 and 2 stare at me for a moment, asking if I paid. I just smile and nod and tell CPA to tell them my income last year, at which I simply said good night. Was that petty? Absolutely. Gratifying? Damn right. CPA later told me that I should have seen the looks on their faces when they heard that my income was triple what they were making. You know what they say, guys, money can't buy class. And honestly, I wish I could see their faces as well. Nothing like cocky, arrogant snobs getting put in their place by the quiet guy, right? I do wish that OP didn't pay for everyone's dinner though, like that was a power move, I'll admit, but definitely unnecessary. And a lot of people in the comments are arguing that OP got played by those 2 engineers. Now, I'm not even sure if this qualifies as revenge. I think it does, but I'll let the public be the judge. First off, this story occurred many years ago. Let me give you a rundown of the laws around divorce where we lived at the time. Both parties need to agree to the divorce unless one party can prove that the other party's at fault. This would mean something akin to cheating, but there's also other reasons, but cheating falls into this. Now, I honestly shouldn't have married my ex-wife, but I was young, dumb, and she was pretty, and I did what I did. So after the first year of marriage, I came to the conclusion that I wanted to end our marriage as it wasn't working out for many reasons. However, my ex-wife did not want to divorce. Her life was much better being married to me than without me, and I think she was trying to hold on to that, but there was no love. I kept pushing for a divorce so I could move on with my life. And that's when my ex-wife set a price of $100,000 to agree to a divorce. Now this does happen here, where if one party wants a divorce and the other doesn't, The party that doesn't want the divorce comes up with a cash payment they want, and you negotiate it from there. Now, I didn't have $100,000, but I could get about $25,000, and I was willing to pay that. Also, we had no kids, didn't own anything together, etc. We spent a long time going back and forth over money, and she would see how much I'd pay her to divorce me. She finally agreed, and I was thrilled. I was so happy. I then decided that I would go out and celebrate that night. Now, to give you an idea of how utterly lucky I'm about to get, we lived in a city about the size of Chicago. Many millions of people. There's lots of places to go. My friend took me to a new bar in a part of the city that I've never been to before. We celebrated, had a good time, and I walked out of the bar around 2:30 in the morning. And it was like Christmas. There was my wife with another man, the man whom I had a hunch that she was cheating on me with, and I was so happy. She was heading for a taxi, and I ran and got into a taxi behind her, and I told the cab driver to follow them. Much to my enjoyment, the taxi was clearly going to my house. So she gets out, and I pull the camera out, and I get a few pictures of her kissing this man. Once I get the photos, I get out of the car, and I approach the two lovebirds. I introduce myself, thank the kind gentleman, and I make one request. If they're going to be intimate, please do not do it in my house. That's all. I then hand her lover my business card, thank him for all the money he saved me, and tell him if he ever wants to go grab a beer, I'd be more than happy to buy him a few rounds. I then wish the two lovebirds all the best and go upstairs and head to bed. And to say that my ex-wife was livid was an understatement. However, the next morning, she pointed out something that I have no idea how strong her argument could be in a courtroom, but it did concern me. She said that since we already agreed to divorce, it wasn't really cheating, and I would still have to pay her the $100,000. Well, that afternoon, I get a phone call. It's my ex-wife's boyfriend. He apologized for sleeping with my ex-wife, and I told him no worries. He then said that he'd like to talk to me in person. It turns out that he had been previously cheated on, and apparently my ex-wife lied to him about her relationship status. She said we were waiting on our divorce to be finalized, which was not true, and that she did not live with me anymore, which was also not true. He also asked me if I slept with her in the last 6 months, and I said I did, on many occasions. It turns out their relationship had began 6 months prior, and she said that her and I were completely over. Whoops. I then asked him if he had any documentation of them dating, and he goes, yeah. He then ends up sending me all the pictures he took of them together, some of which included him kissing her, etc. He also sent me numerous screenshots of text messages between her and him, some of which included her clearly lying about her relationship status with me. I put all of this in a folder and backed it up to numerous places, including a USB drive which I hid in my office at work. I then went to my ex-wife and I had a sit down with her. I went over the mountain of evidence I had against her. I then gave her 2 options. Option A, she agreed to a non-contested divorce. I'll give her 30 days to move out and she gets nothing from me and I get nothing from her. Option B is I get a lawyer and I sue the living crap out of her. I'll get a massive judgment against her, still get my divorce, and saddle her with a ton of debt for the rest of her life. She agreed to the non-contested divorce. That was on a Saturday, and Monday we went to the courthouse and filed for divorce. This started her 30 days. We had a court hearing a few weeks later, and the judge made it clear that we were doing a non-contested divorce. Once he stamps the divorce decree, we have to report this to City Hall, and our divorce will be finalized. We both agreed, we both signed, judge stamped the documents, and I grabbed my divorce decree and rushed to City Hall to report my divorce. I was a free man. I ended up becoming friends with the guy that my wife was cheating with, and we still talk today. Oh, the beauty of karma and fate, right guys? Like, I love how the wife got absolutely nothing in the end. No money, and no more boyfriend. And it's also nice that OP ends up with a new friend who happens to be an awesome bro who did the right thing. And I love this person's comment right here. This person says, geez, the karma that dropped on her head was the size of an aircraft carrier. Ain't that the truth? So I'm on a late-night flight from New York City to Salt Lake, traveling home after visiting family for the holidays. The flight was landing in the early morning hours, like 1 a.m.-ish, so I was trying to catch a nap before I had to drive another 2.5 hours from the airport to actually get home. Boarding was exceptionally slow that day, so I and the people nearby had been sitting in our seats for close to half an hour, and we hadn't even started to taxi the runway. Everyone's either settling in for a nap like me, or setting up to quietly read, or otherwise occupy themselves because it's the middle of the damn night. Now let's introduce the characters. There's me, the tired traveler who wants nothing more than the sweet, sweet neck cramps from an airplane nap. The wholesome granny, who's a delightful little lady who just wants to put on her reading glasses and finish her novel. Then there's the New Jersey bro, who's a dude that apparently spent his entire holidays trying to valiantly get alcohol poisoning. And then the New Jersey girl, who's a typical pretty party girl whose hobbies include binge drinking and loads of self-tanning sessions. For the record, I do know D-bags come from all 50 states. New Jersey does not have a monopoly on a-holes. I just mention it because they both had Jersey Shore style accents. The Karen bitch had a voice like the nanny, and the accent of Janice Soprano. So our seating arrangement was this. On the left side of the plane, from the window to the aisle, was loud New Jersey girl, me, and wholesome granny. On the right side, from aisle to window, was New Jersey bro, some poor old guy trying to sleep, and a snoozing middle-aged guy who apparently can sleep through the apocalypse. So while on the flight, New Jersey bro decides that he fancies Miss Self-Tanner, so he strikes up a conversation. They realize that they have some college friend in common, which leads to a discussion about partying over college break. Now, I did party in college myself. I probably also had stupid conversations about it, but my conversations never occurred while leaning across multiple sleepy air passengers on a red-eye, at volumes that could drown out the jet engines. The New Jersey girl is essentially screaming and laughing in my ear, while wholesome granny looks horrified at the discussion of various drunken nights, shotgunning beers, and getting stomach pumps at the hospital. At some point, everyone in the back half of the aircraft has now heard about Jaeger bombs on New Year's Eve. Everyone, including my poor, exhausted self. People are looking around with increasingly angry expressions. Everyone wants to be polite, but everyone's getting pissed off. I exchange a few glances with poor wholesome granny, and that's when I realize that if nobody tells these fantastic fratty partiers to shut up, that I'll probably get no rest and I'll fall asleep at the wheel when I drive home. I should also mention that I'm very awkward. I once apologized to a woman on another airplane after she hit me in the face with her Kate Spade bag. Standing up to a stranger is not in my DNA, but as a chronic insomniac, I do value my sleep. And after 30 minutes, even I had too much. So I turn to my right, look at New Jersey bro, and say, loud enough for everyone on my half of the plane to hear, I will switch seats with you if you use an inside voice for the rest of the flight. For the love of God, please, you can have my seat. For the sake of all of us on this plane. For a brief millisecond, there is silence. New Jersey bro freezes in his seat and he turns red. Loud New Jersey girl scoffs and she makes some outraged sound, followed by, oh geez, you sound like a total a-hole. Every passenger who's awake within 10 rows chuckles, and one person even said to New Jersey girl, hey, he said out loud what we're all thinking, followed by more scoffing from loud New Jersey girl. New Jersey bro has the grace to look embarrassed and he says, okay, I'll switch. So we switch, and he's now between New Jersey girl and wholesome granny. At least they're together now. I settle in, and the woman in the seat directly in front of me turns around. It's a younger mother with 3 kids. A toddler, a lap baby, and an older kid, absorbed in some cartoon on an iPad, wearing headphones, because she isn't a sociopath. She says to me, I have 3 kids, including a baby, and she's never made as much noise on a plane as those guys. A few more chuckles. They do quiet down somewhat, though poor wholesome granny's peaceful reading of her book is occasionally interrupted with laughter that sounds like a parrot trying to imitate an epileptic chimpanzee. At one point, I hear giggling, and I see loud New Jersey girl trying to secretly take my picture from behind the in-flight menu. Since cell phone cameras cannot penetrate opaque laminated cardboard, it's pretty obviously not stealthy when I see the flash. When we land, New Jersey bro deplanes with a red-faced and a bowed head. I get a priceless glare from New Jersey girl. Life is good. But wait, there's more. I ran into someone I knew at the baggage claim. I know it sounds ridiculous, but it did happen. So I start chatting with her and I rant a little about the D-bags that sat near me, leaving out no critical detail or unkind thought. We laugh. I then see my bag, pick it up, and prepare to drive my totally badass Toyota Yaris home. But when I turn around, I see the New Jersey buddies. It's clear they were standing close enough to hear every single word. I make eye contact and just walk off. Wow guys, some people truly have zero self-awareness. Either that, or they literally don't give a care who they're bugging. And really, I read this post thinking that at some point, at least, a flight attendant would get involved and tell those two to shut it, but no, I guess not. Like, I just can't believe people stared angrily at the couple for 30 minutes without saying anything. Where's a Karen when you need her? So many moons ago, think early 2000s, I worked for a small tech company in the Midwest. I started out as a customer service rep. My husband also worked there in a higher level position in a different department. There was an office manager there who did not like me at all when I got hired. She was originally the billing rep and she got moved to the office manager position when the original one who hired me had quit. As an added note, her brother also works there in the same department as my husband. I was pretty much a model employee. My stats were great, I was always on time, and customer feedback surveys were always glowing when I was on shift. However, the manager had it out for me because she was always trying to find something to nitpick about my performance. I told all this to my husband, and he admitted that prior to us getting together and before I was hired, she had, on more than one occasion, expressed interest in dating him, but he rejected her. And now that he's with me, I've got a target on my back. So I complained to the owner, but he pretty much just shrugs it off. She had been there forever and he didn't want to rock the boat. Come performance review time and she gave me a terrible review and a tiny raise. Everyone else on the team gets 50 cents to $1 per hour raise and she gives me a nickel. 5 measly cents. About 6 months later, there was a big shakeup in the company, and the GM and 2 people from my husband's department left to work at another company who did the same type of business. Shortly thereafter, a couple of big accounts my boss was pursuing ends up going to the other company. Thinking that perhaps information about the accounts he was trying to land was leaked to the other company, he sent a couple of people home for 2 days while he investigated, including the office manager who hated me. On day 2, he met with the team and confirmed there was no leak. So he would be bringing the workers back in, and cue the PettyRevenge. I found the office manager's blog some time ago, and she'd been posting frequent updates since the shakeup. When she was sent home, she posted multiple updates about the situation, including how she figured the owner would screw up payroll, not pay taxes, and get in trouble with the IRS. She also posted some pretty nasty things about the owner. She did make a feeble attempt to keep it anonymous by spelling everyone's names backwards and making up a fake name for the company, but it was very clear that it was her and our company she was talking about. After the team meeting, I asked to meet with my boss alone, and I showed him all the posts. He dug in and he found even more damning stuff she'd written, including how she couldn't stand me and she wanted to get me fired because I stole her husband. I couldn't contain my grin when she returned to the office, only to be told to pack up her stuff and go. Within a year later, I had a big pay bump and a promotion to management, and I assume that she's off somewhere making people miserable. Honestly guys, that manager deserves to be fired, not only for targeting OP and wanting her to fail, but also for her sheer stupidity. Because if you have a blog that can be accessible by everyone, you gotta make sure you're extra careful not to bash your boss and his company. Like, at least make a better attempt at keeping it anonymous, Karen. Come on, spelling employees' names backwards? Definitely not very smart. That brings us to another end of r/PettyRevenge. If you enjoyed today's stories, do hit that thumbs up, and if you're not subscribed, consider subscribing so you don't miss these crazy stories. And if you missed the last episode on the channel, it's an r/I don't work here lady episode, where a psycho Karen trashes a store over a toy. It's such a ridiculous story, so go check it out if you haven't. And myself and Stevie Boy will see you guys in the next one. We love you.